So my name is Gabby, short for Gabriella, and thank you very much for having me today. This is the first time that I'm joining this type of an event, and I'm very honored to be here. Looking at me, you may not realize that I have a disability, but I do. So I'll tell you about my journey, and it's quite an interesting one, I'll say that. But before I begin, I am curious to know, show of hands, has anyone here ever heard of the hit television show Dragon's Den? Has anyone ever heard of Dragon's Den? Okay, so for those of you that haven't, it's a show on CBC where a business owner will ask some venture capitalists for money for their business in exchange for a percentage of their business. And having the journey that I do in my life, I actually did try out for Dragon's Den, and I did make it to the show, and I did present in front of the dragons. And one of the dragons told me that I was the worst presenter on the Den. Yeah. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, I'm going to ask you if you think I was the worst presenter on the Den, so I can feel a little better about myself. And in case you're wondering what dragon it was that told me that, out of respect I won't say, but she told me that. And for those of you that don't know, there's only one female on the panel. So, okay, so again, my name is Gabby, and I have MS. I have multiple sclerosis. And for those of you that may not know what MS is, it's a neurological illness where basically we have a sheath that is missing, a myelin sheath that is missing from our nerve ending. So think of a phone cable, think of the wire that's in the phone cable, and then the plastic that goes around the phone cable. So MS patients, our nervous system attacks that nerve and removes that sheath, and by doing so, that's how we have issues. So MS patients can range in ailments. There are 4 stages. I'm in relapsing remitting MS, and it can go up to stage 4, which is progressive. And I may look, you know, normal if there's such a word, but I have daily challenges that I struggle through. So I'll tell you a little bit about my journey. When I was in my mid-20s, I was in school and I had a really difficult time focusing. I would forget a lot of things. I woke up one day with the loss of vision in my peripheral vision in my left eye. I had a lot of spasticity. My knees were very tight. I couldn't always bend them properly. I had extreme tingling in my hands and my feet, and that's really kind of when it actually started. So I went through a series of doctors and series of tests, and after 4 years of going through different tests and doctors, I was diagnosed with MS at the age of 30. That was 10 years ago. Now you're all doing the math, figure out how old I am, yes. And I remember when I was diagnosed, it was devastating because truthfully I didn't even know what MS was. And so I went down the journey of obviously researching and went to some support groups and really didn't know what to expect. When I was diagnosed, I had 14 lesions in my brain and 2 in my spinal cord. And for those that may not know, those are plaques, you know, spots on the brain. I was fortunate that there were none close to my cerebellum, which is what affects your motor skills. So I am walking as a result. However, with the amount of lesions that I have, my neurologist did tell me that within 10 years I would be in a wheelchair based on that. I'm not yet. I may be, and I'm okay with that when I get there. I'm fully prepared in my home and my workplace. So I'll tell you about my journey and you know what MS has actually done for me. So on a day-to-day basis, the hardest thing for me is actually putting my head on the pillow. Because when my body gets in a very relaxed state, I really honestly feel like someone's pouring thousands of bugs all over me. The itching that I have at night is extreme. So extreme that I went through a very long phase of not even wanting to go to sleep because it was hurting me to do so. And I got to a point where I would keep a fork on my nightstand to help me itch because it was so extreme, and I would have scars of blood on my arms and my thighs because I really needed that relief. So my husband needed to really calm me down and say there are no bugs in our bed, and I needed to do this mind shift of getting past that. And I still go through those symptoms every night for the last 10 years. But I've learned to manage it. And I've learned to manage the tingling that I have. There are times where I literally have to stop driving and sit at the side of the road because my feet are tingling. And you know that feeling when you walk and your step and you feel like your foot's asleep? Can you imagine having that a little bit more extreme for hours? It's difficult, right? So I've learned how to manage that as well. And in my hands, and then some cognitive issues. But I'll tell you, I did go through the first few years kind of jumping on the pity bandwagon saying, why me? Because I'm a good person and I volunteer, and I couldn't understand. But I'll tell you something, there was one day where I was at my office and my superior had said to me, Gabby, I want you to make an action plan for our sales reps. I need them to bill $160,000 a year by the end of the year. Make an action plan and go do it. So I was in an operational role at the time, and so I was looking at the paper, making an action plan of how I was going to get the sales reps to get there. And at that moment, I had a mind shift, and that was maybe about 4 years into my diagnosis. And I said to myself, if I'm making an action plan for my workplace, why can't I make an action plan for my life? And I actually pushed that paper aside, and I made a list of all the goals that I wanted to achieve in my life and things that I needed to do. And it was a very long list, but that was fine, because then when I looked at the list, I broke it up into smaller components, and it turned out to be a month project where I broke it up into components. And I remember making an action plan and planning out how I was going to achieve these goals. So one of them, as silly as it may seem, but I'll tell you, I loved the show The Price is Right. Loved it. And at the time, Bob Barker was the host. Do you remember Bob Barker? Yes. Okay. So I thought, darn it, I want to go on the show. And so that's an uncontrollable thing. I can get tickets, I can sit in the audience, but you have no control if they're going to call you or not. But you know what? I made an action plan. I thought, okay, how am I going to get there? It's going to cost money to get to LA. And so I made an action plan, and I realized, okay, I need a part-time job, and I'm going to work for exactly 18 months, earning this much more, put this money aside, get to apply for tickets. I got the tickets. I raised the money just by working a second job. And I told my husband we're going to LA. And he said, why are we going to LA? And I said, because I have tickets to The Price is Right. He said, what? He's like, can we go anywhere else? And I said, you know what? Yes, let's go on a cruise, but we'll start at LA. And we'll spend a couple days there and we'll go. So anyway, that's exactly what we did. I have a great husband who supports me, and that's exactly what we did. So we stood in line. We got there as soon as the doors opened at 6 a.m. The taping was at 9. And the lineup was very long ahead of us, and they were taking 140 people, and we were 137 and 138th in line. Can you imagine? So we got in. So I'm in the audience, and I have one of those yellow name tags with my name across. That was really cool. Yeah, and I wasn't called on stage, but that's okay. It was the experience, and it was the journey. And I'll tell you, that's just one example of, I don't know if I would have done that if I didn't have MS. MS really pushed me and inspired me to do well and to challenge myself and to go after dreams. And we're not going to achieve all of our dreams. There's lots of goals that I had on my page that I'm not quite there yet, or things have derailed. But I've tried, and that's what makes me happy is the journey, not so much the end result, but the journey has been wonderful. So you want to know my Dragon's Den story? All right. So Dragon's Den, I have a side business. It's a website that sells wedding favors and things like that. And so I applied for Dragon's Den. I went to Toronto. I met with the producer, and I put my wedding favors on a table and I said my pitch, and there was maybe about 15 producers all lined up, and they just called our numbers one by one, and there was over 7,200 people that applied, can you imagine, that met with the producers, so I was one of them. And maybe a minute in my speech to the producer, where she was screening people out, she stopped me and she said, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Because I'd like to be on Dragon's Den." And she said, "You're a basement business. You're not going to make them rich. I'm sorry, but you can leave." And I thought to myself, who is she to tell me that I can't finish my speech? I came all this way. I packed up all these favors, and I was so excited. I'd planned this speech for so long. And I said, okay, what do I need to change if I want to apply again? And she said, you can. She said, you can come back next year. And she said, I want you to work on these 6 things. I said, okay, and she gave me the list of 6 things, and I said, thank you very much, and I left, and I went home, and I looked at these 6 things, and I started to make my plan as to how I was going to change my pitch. And then I saw a newspaper article that Dragon's Den was auditioning in Burlington the week after. So guess what I did? I went to Burlington. Yeah. So I go to Burlington hoping, okay, I got to meet another producer, because nowhere on the contract that I signed said how long you have to wait. So I'm waiting in the lineup, thousands of people all around me. I've got my number, waiting for my pitch. They called my name. I see 15 producers. Guess who was the producer that called my name? The same lady in Toronto. Her name is Tracy. I said, "Hi, Tracy." And she looked at me and she said, "I recognize you. Were you here last week in Toronto?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "Didn't I tell you to come next year?" And I said, "Yes, you did. But I changed those 7 things, and I just want you to hear me out. And it's okay if you don't choose me, but let me finish my pitch, please." And she did. She let me finish my pitch, and by the end of the pitch, she said, "If you are chosen, you will hear from us within 3 months." So I put that date on my calendar, and I waited, and 3 days before I got a call. And the call was, "You're up on Monday if you're interested to meet the Dragons." I said, "Yes, I am." So I did. I went to the studios. I met in front of the Dragons, and out of the 130 people that got to meet the Dragons, 72 made it to air on season 19, and I was one of them. So that was really cool, and so I pitched my idea to the Dragons, and you know, they had prepared me, and they said they're going to try to derail you. They're going to ask you for your numbers, and make sure that you don't tell them, make sure that you keep going with your pitch. And that's exactly what I did. And so every time Kevin and all the Dragons were saying, "What are your numbers? What'd you do last year?" I said, "I'll tell you in a minute, absolutely." And I kept speaking, and I actually made them really angry by doing that. So much that I kept talking very quickly, and in case you haven't noticed, I like to talk with my hands. I'm Italian, I'm animated, I'm loud, so I think I was material for TV. And so what happened was Arlene put a tiara on my head, and she said, "I crown you as the worst presenter on the Den." And I thought to myself, wow, that hurts like a dagger. But I'll tell you what it did for me. You know, after a day, I had to schlep my pride off of the ground. But after that, I was motivated. I was supercharged. I watched myself back because they sent me a clip of it. And yeah, I was talking quickly. And yeah, I could have done better. So I went to Toastmasters, and I went to Dale Carnegie, and I took some public speaking courses. And here I am 3 years later, wanting to meet Arlene again so I can invite her here to be in the audience, and hopefully she won't crown me again. So was I the worst presenter on the Den that you've seen, for those of you who see the show? Was I? Good. Did I hear you've seen worse than that? Thank you. Thank you. I can sleep tonight. Thank you. So, but I'll tell you. So as funny as that story is, I'll tell you, it's been an eye-opening experience to have MS, because I really do have struggles. You know, you may see me as a jovial, positive person. It's because I am. This is the path that I've chosen. Life is hard for me. It's really hard. Going to sleep is hard. Waking up is hard. Sometimes my son is late for school in the morning, not because of him, but because of me, because mommy has a hard time standing up, because mommy had a hard time sleeping from the night before. So it's hard. I cry, I do feel sad, I go through a range of emotions, but darn it, I'm determined. I'm determined to make a difference. I am, as a result, an ambassador voluntarily with the MS Society of Canada. So I go to many speaking events, galas and golf tournaments and things like that, in hopes of motivating and inspiring. Thanks.
Hey guys, it's me again. Sorry, you got to look at my face a little bit longer today. Anyway, we're just going to take a quick break. Please feel free to look around at the different exhibitors. Don't forget, we have a silent auction table over here, 50-50 tickets and raffle prizes as well. So we're going to turn the radio back on and let you listen to some music.